Hi guys, this is Daryl at 151 Farms, and we're just wrapping up our 151 Farms OG tour. The OG tour went around the state of California and it talked to people that have been fighting the war on drugs, have been impacted by Prop 64, and have something to say about it. And with that, I'll introduce you to my companion for this trip, Matthew Hutchings. Hi Matthew.
Hello.
How you doing today?
I'm doing all right.
So where are we right now?
Well, right now we're at my family's home. I've been staying in Vital Creek.
Is that Lytle Creek? Give us an idea where that is.
Just north of Fontana in the Los Angeles area.
Okay. You've done this tour with me. We went pretty much all over California, Northern California.
We did.
What people did you get to see?
Krista Koenig, visited Eddie Lepp, saw Krista's friend Anna's farm.
Anna Marie Borges, yeah.
Anna Marie Borges.
And in talking to these people, what was your sense? I mean, not all of this is criminally related, like in your case, but you've seen some civil issues related to Prop 64. What are your thoughts?
It just was. It's just set up to fail from the start. Is set up to exclude people from the start, and to be accessible only to people who had, the most money and the most connections. And
that's not what medical cannabis or medical psychedelics should be, in your opinion, is it?
No. And one of the main things that made me think is that eventually, when psychedelics is inevitably legal, and it'll be sooner rather than later, the last thing that we need is a Prop 64 for psychedelics. And if I'm in a position to try and help that not become a reality, then I'll definitely fight that with every ounce of my being, because it's not in the spirit of any of these substances. The whole spirit of it is community-based, and there should be ease of access.
We need to recognize that. So, guys, this is a very windy area. I hope the audio stays together, but what Matthew saw was the castle, where Prop 215, Dennis Perone initiated a law as it went to cannabis for medical use, that is. What were your thoughts on that? Is that spirit still there? Do the people that are left, Dennis has just passed on, do they still have the drive to maintain medical cannabis?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's pretty horrified by what's happening with 64, and just looking for ways to reverse it.
You met with Wayne Justman and John Entwistle, which was Dennis Perone's mate in life.
Mm-hmm.
There were some other people there, I don't recall all their names, but they're all pretty horrified and feel like there's nothing that can be done to repair 64. Was that the sense you got?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, when reading the text of the law itself, I mean, in some senses, it's like obviously we couldn't, Prop 215, it needed some things, but the spirit of Prop 215 itself and the base of Prop 215 was fine, and that's what we needed to build from. We didn't need Prop 64 to come in and essentially erase Prop 215.
Which is what it does, yeah. What an initiative would do. Now, you're only 26 years old, so how familiar were with you of the history of activism and things that went towards this?
I mean, to be honest, I didn't know any of it.
Okay. Is it important to understand a little bit?
I mean, yeah, it definitely is. And, just at least for understanding the intent that the people who fought for it had. Because the intent is important. And, and because once you understand the intent and you understand what 64 actually entails, then the two...
They can't coexist.
They're not compatible.
No. Good point. Now, talking about you in your case, so you're recently sentenced to 10 years just to recover, re-encapsulate what that was. There's 3 different counts. Can you tell us what that entailed?
Well, the 3 different counts are possession with intent, LSD, mushrooms, and MDMA.
Okay, and in your opinion, we're all for medical benefits?
I mean, that was my intent, and like I was interested to see Dennis's stance that that there wasn't any cannabis use that wasn't medical or medicinal, because that's kind of how I felt with psychedelics, is that even if you're supposedly taking them just for fun, there's you're it, you almost can't help but be improved by them.
So even if it's, let's just for relax you or take you to another place, alcohol does that, but becomes addictive, and the side effects are such that you have hangovers, cirrhosis, and so on. You don't have that with these psychedelic or cannabinoid-related products, do you?
Well, I mean, the only one would really be if you don't have proper nutritional uptake, and you don't, have knowledge of pre and post load. You can have a form of a hangover from MDMA, but as opposed to alcohol, if you have, if you have proper nutrition, proper diet, and you know what you're doing going into it, and you have an appropriate dose, then that's really, it's more like a recovery time than a hangover. But for LSD and mushrooms, it really there shouldn't be a hangover. I mean, for psilocybin, it's almost like the opposite of a hangover, which is why people like it so much, and that effect persists for months, and for some people for years after a single dose. It feels like you're cleared out and you're more together than before you took it.
Yep. And I would think, like cannabis, the medical community needs to take a harder look at what psychedelics can do to repair some of these conditions, such as PTSD.
And
are there others you can cite?
I mean, for mushrooms, there's cluster headaches. Mushrooms and LSD are used for end-of-life anxiety. All of them are used for as treatments of depression. MDMA in particular is promising for PTSD. Psilocybin and LSD are promising, specifically psilocybin more than LSD, for anti-addiction treatments. Psilocybin has been shown to be the most effective stop smoking aid that we have, and there's strong signals that it's just habit breaking in general. So
you've done some research. Have you read peer-reviewed papers on this studies?
I've read pretty much every single medical study in regards to all three substances.
And that's what motivated you to get involved with it to a large degree? As opposed to heroin and meth and all the other drugs that could be used to make money?
I read those after the indictment, because I'd known all this from anecdotal evidence from what I'd seen. So my experience with this was primarily anecdotal. And then while I was involved, and particularly, after leading up to and after the indictment, these things are back in the public eye, and they're back for a reason, because we're taking a second look at them, and medically, like the evidence is starting to pile up that we should take a second look at them, and that's part of that's part of one of the aspects of prohibition that has made the prohibition so durable. Is not only are they prohibited, but medical research is prohibited, and trying to get exceptions for that prohibition, as people who were trying to do medical research into cannabis discovered, is that it's very difficult to get a permission to investigate these things medically when you're trying to ask permission from people who are convinced, based on no evidence except this common misconception, that these are nothing but dangerous drugs.
And so medical communities tend to steer you towards prescription drugs, and you've had some of your own conditions. Can you compare how the organic substances have done for you personally compared to like opiates and prescription drugs?
Well,
All right. Hello.
Hey, how's it
Hey, we
going?
got another guest. Hi. I'm Daryl. We're shooting a video right now. Please come on, grab a chair, and have a seat.
Oh, I can't be in the video.
Okay, he can't be in a video. Okay, let's continue with Matthew then. So Matthew, please go on. Tell us.
Well, I mean, it's not to cast shade on all prescription substances. I mean, I've had positive experiences with Wellbutrin, but from experiences that I've heard in general from people who take like SSRIs, for example, for depression in particular, I'll focus on that one because that's where my main area of experience is with. If you go into a doctor and you say I have depression and I've never been treated for it before, first they'll give you Wellbutrin, and if you're still saying this isn't doing it for me, then they'll add an SSRI.
What is an SSRI?
It's a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor.
Okay.
And they cause all kinds of problems with appetite, with
Sexual performance.
yeah. I mean that's the main one that people report is you just plays
You lose
hell with
desire.
plays hell with your sex drive, and also they're habit forming. They're extremely physically addictive. So if you go to stop, you have to taper off almost like a benzodiazepines, because you'll get brain zaps, they call them, which is just like, it's almost like a seizure, so like a minor seizure, and just all kinds of really unpleasant side effects. And that's all that we've had for half a century to deal with, depression and a lot of these other mental illnesses. And when in reality, like, these other substances were right here the whole time, but they were made illegal for political reasons and not based on any medical or scientific evidence, and the sentences were made for the same reasons.
Well,
So,
speaking of sentences, you had a judge sentence you to 10 years. How did she classify you? What was her opinion of you that she stated from the bench?
well, what she told me was that I was greedy and I was a parasite and a danger to society.
And that was based on what? The charges that she was able to read.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I don't know really what it was based on factually, because I didn't really make a whole lot of money. I mean, they got less than $20,000 from all my bank accounts and my pockets and my house.
Now, this was pre-sentence, so this shows bias by the judge, in my opinion. But that's left to be determined, and you do have some recourses even after sentencing that we'll discuss. But based on the way you were treated, and for example, you're wearing a hat by Anna Gabriel. She has AG Harvest, and they're about to seize her property. She's a medical cannabis patient, has been one for years. So as Prop 64 overtook Prop 215, she's now a criminal. And if nothing else, she's limited to growing the medicine she needs on a property that's perfectly suited for it by the local governments that make it impossible to get licensed to grow a for-profit cannabis product that she would use for medical. So as I kind of take a little detour when I'm talking about her, but as it relates to your sentence, you have a judge who's sitting up there calling you greedy and a parasite, and she's basing that on the evidence that's been provided. Have you seen all that evidence? Did your attorney help you with that? I want to know specifically what you think. How many attorneys have you hired over the course of your life, Matthew?
I mean, well, I have hired 0 attorneys, so I've had 1 attorney provided to me, which is the public defender
In this case, okay.
And as far as having had all the information provided to me, I mean, there's several things that were under seal, including my warrant. And when I asked for them after sentencing had concluded, it was said that they were under seal, and he told me that he couldn't view them, but neither had he made an attempt to ask the prosecutor if we could have access to them. And the general vibe I got was that he considered it was a foregone conclusion, and that it was a lost cause, and that it wasn't worth him putting any more than the minimum of effort to file, just the bare minimum of paperwork and do the bare minimum of work in general. to just shepherd this case to its conclusion, which didn't come to a conclusion that was, anyone who looks at it and compares it to other sentences, or just looks at it based on its own merits, nobody would think that that serves the public interest.
No, 10 years of putting you away for psychedelics that have medical value, and we're seeing that in upcoming
And
ordinances.
more importantly, even if they had zero medical value, which is the opposite of the case, the harm that's caused to the community is so vanishingly small that it's hard to detect it at all. So, many times more harm is being done to me as an individual than I have ever done to any individual that I've had any kind of effect on throughout my entire life. So it's just completely out of proportion. In a sane world, I would be getting slapped with a fine for not being licensed and not being a licensed medical practitioner. But unfortunately, we don't have, outside of clinical trials and like specialist exemptions that people like MAPS have worked for literally half a century, the same half a century that they've been illegal, to carve out. There are no people, you can't go to anyone except people who are classified, mislabeled under the law as drug dealers for providing these psychedelic medicines to people. Similarly to the model cannabis was under for the same period.
So how do you think the model under Prop 64 works for the medical cannabis patient, based on what you've seen over this tour, and the others have had an opinion, and your personal experiences? Has it been beneficial?
Put simply, it doesn't work. But the main effect that it has is to raise the price exponentially. So there's a lot of people who can't afford their medicine, and it's kind of, and just because people want to have a system where they can monopolize licenses.
We're seeing that. Now, you met with Eddie Lepp. Tell us, what are we looking at here? Are these two pictures he's done?
Yes. One of them was made while he was in prison, the one right here, and then another one made afterwards.
Okay. And he's donated one of these to you to be used as you wish, potentially for legal fees. What do you think, based on the only experience you've had with a court-appointed public defender, what would you recommend telling other people to look for should they find themselves in the same situation when dealing with a court-appointed public defender?
Get a second and third and fourth and fifth opinion.
What if they can't? Should they be more involved with their case?
You're going to have to do the research, because no matter how fucked you think you are, you have to go and look for any...
Question everything.
Exactly. So...
Did you do that?
No, because they did a good job of convincing me that there wasn't much that I could do. And, So, I don't know. They're very good at what they do.
What was the attorney's name?
The attorney's name was Michael Whalen.
And he was working against a U.S. attorney? Assistant U.S. attorney, AUSA?
Yes, Sarah Griswold.
And that assistant U.S. attorney was sort of making you a deal in an attempt to make you change your plea from not guilty to guilty. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and also the judge in question was Beth Lapson Freeman. But basically how I was coerced into signing a guilty plea, an open plea of guilty.
What's the difference?
So a guilty plea is for you're agreeing to a specific deal. An open plea of guilty is that you're just pleading guilty and you agree to accept whatever sentence they eventually impose. So you're not even making a deal. You're basically just
throwing yourself at the mercy.
Yeah, you're putting your neck on the chopping block,
yep.
Basically. So there was a stick and a carrot aspect to it. The stick aspect was that if I didn't go for this open plea of guilty, they would file a superseding indictment, basically adding charges for possession of a firearm in furtherance of drug trafficking, which was not the case. You know, I had legally owned firearms. That the only firearm that was in vicinity of, you know, the drugs in question was a legally owned pistol that was at my house. It was in my room, and
You saw that in the indictment.
yeah,
And then the Department of Homeland Security, that was the officer that filed the original affidavit regarding the arrest and what was confiscated, right?
yes, and
So in that, what was confiscated? Your ketamine, your cannabis?
yeah, ketamine, cannabis. But let's real quick before we get to that.
Okay.
The carrot aspect of getting me to sign the open guilty plea was I was released into a rehab called Newbridge, and Newbridge essentially lied to me and said that everyone who comes into Newbridge gets a conviction alternative program, which is now known as alternative to incarceration program, which is if you qualify for this program, if they send you down and the committee, which is made up of judges, pretrial officers, other federal employees, decides that you qualify for this program, you complete this program over the course of about a year, and then you receive 5 years probation instead of whatever sentence you would
That
have
seems like a carrot. Was your judge in favor of that?
She agreed. I don't know that she was in favor. She agreed to have me sent down. She said she had serious reservations.
Well, there's another evidence of bias.
So, well, not just that, but my attorney said that was unfamiliar with the program, or claimed to be unfamiliar with the program. If he'd been familiar with the program, he would have known that it's specifically stipulated that anyone, because they got me with a leadership enhancement.
Tell us about that. What is leadership enhancement?
Just that they purport to be able to prove that you employed other people or directed other people who played a more minor role in the conspiracy.
Okay.
But the rules of ATIP, the rules of this program were that anyone who plays more than a minor role in a criminal conspiracy, such as money laundering ring or a drug trafficking scheme, is ineligible for the program. And if the attorney had been, if he had even just done his homework or known about this program,
Well, even the judge.
yeah, they would have known that there was no reason to even consider this, because I would have been rejected out of hand, which I was.
Well, tell us about that. So you go there, and what happens? You're interviewed?
They asked me a really loaded question. They asked me, do you think you were good at what you did? And I kind of,
That's odd.
yeah, so I just told them I didn't really know how to answer that question, and it seemed like an odd question.
Do you know who interviewed you?
I don't remember.
Okay.
A judge and a bunch of other people.
But they're at the facility?
Yeah, they were at San Francisco courthouse, I believe.
So you had to pass that interview process with ATIP to be considered for that as an option to sentence.
That was basically part of my lawyer's lack of due diligence, or lack of just doing any kind of homework. If he'd read any kind of case history regarding ATIP, or even just called down and asked.
Well, who recommended ATIP? The AUSA?
It was Newbridge, honestly. It was the rehab, because everyone that went through Newbridge, who had, like, half of the people there were referred by the feds.
As a pre-trial condition, you had to go through that?
Yeah, I mean, it was something that I was able to do because of my history of drug abuse, and the history of mental illness.
And how long were you involved with Newbridge?
For three months.
Okay. Under court supervision?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't allowed to leave. It was,
The condition.
If I left the program, I would go back to jail.
Okay.
So.
You did how many months in jail?
4.5.
Okay. And that was a tough time. That was a county jail?
Yes.
All right. And then to get out of that, you go to Newbridge. You do 3 months there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're offered a tip through Newbridge's recommendation.
Yeah, that's just kind of how they go about things. And my lawyers said he was unfamiliar with the program.
You should have gotten familiar. And then the judge didn't seem to think you were going to be eligible for it. But yet they put you through that process.
But if they had acknowledged that, then
the carrot wasn't there.
What they told me was that was the main reason I had to give an open plea of guilty, as opposed to a specific, because only people who give an open plea of guilty are eligible to apply.
Have you found that to be true?
Found what to be true?
That it requires an open plea.
Oh yeah, I mean that's what they said at least.
But at least as we sit here right now, you don't know if that's true.
I don't know if it's true. I have no reason to doubt that it's true.
Okay, but anyway, to cut to the chase, the carrot never ended up being a carrot because you were ineligible.
No, it would never existed.
So then what happens? You got your open plea.
I got my open plea. Was rejected from ATIP. And we got into halfway houses, was eventually allowed to leave the halfway house because it was honestly, the halfway house was worse than jail.
What was your probation officer recommending the court sentence you to?
Oh, well, the Jessica Goldsberry, who did the pre-sentencing report interview, made a recommendation of 7 years.
Okay. How did you feel about that at the time?
I mean, that was still, to be honest, it's still an outrageous sentence, but it's better than 14, which the prosecution was recommending.
And what did they have you classified as in terms of counts? I know there's a numbering system. What were you numbered at?
So the offense level goes up to, I believe it's 43, and they had me at a 37 due to the way that they measure LSD. Primarily, the amount of LSD, or as they reported it.
Did you take exception to that, and did your attorney take exception to that?
Well, the way that there's an amendment to the sentencing guidelines on LSD, and it's called Amendment 488, and it acknowledges that the way that they measure the amount of LSD is deeply flawed, because they'll weigh the carrier medium and the packaging and everything.
Oh.
And so they said I had 550 or something grams of LSD. Which
that's a huge amount. Yeah.
Anything about LSD, that means 5.5 million hits. In reality, I had about maybe 25,000 and change. The problem is Amendment 488, instead, they'll allow you to ask them to go back and count the individual hits, but they assign a weight to each hit that is 4 times the amount of LSD that's actually present. So each dose equals 4 hundredths of a milligram, or 4 micrograms, or 400 micrograms.
Matthew, was any of this argued by your attorney in consideration for the count?
I'd never heard of Amendment 488 until the judgment was passed and I started reaching out to people.
Okay, so you've learned a lot since the sentencing.
Yeah, a lot more than I learned from my attorney.
Would you have agreed to a guilty plea in an open court had you known what you know now?
Definitely not.
So what could that attorney have done better? I mean, one, he should have known about ATIP, but did he actually work on your case? Did he spend the time with you? Did he represent your interests as a professional officer that a court should, based on what you know now?
I mean, looking back, no, and there's a whole list of things that illustrate why, and I'm not sure that I should get into that.
Well, I'm just wondering about, for example, is he from a law firm? Is this somebody the court's appointed? So when you're exchanging emails,
to my knowledge, no, he's not a part of a law firm, and he was working off of a Gmail address.
Okay, so we should take an issue with that.
Apparently unusual.
It is quite unusual. And then in terms of the time he spent with you, did he actually always talk about the case when he was with you?
Well, I mean, there was at least one occasion when he said that there wasn't much to talk about, but he'd still like to come hang out with me and get lunch and charge the government $90 an hour for doing so.
So this attorney, it's safe to say, was being paid $90 an hour, which is nothing if you're a qualified, skilled attorney. So the fact that he doesn't have a law office is he's sending his correspondence via Gmail, and you're doing lunch where he's not talking about the case. He's basically charging the government so he can have lunch with
Basically
you.
running the clock, which
Running
is
the clock.
lightweight fraud.
And as far as his real representations in court, did he respect the attorney-client privilege?
Well, I mean, there were documents that my family had specifically requested to be redacted, including letters from my mom and from me that we requested to be redacted, but that he supposedly accidentally submitted unredacted versions of on electronic court filing, and he admitted that he had made a mistake in emails with me and my mom.
So that was his mistake.
And it ended up in the news media, which is exactly what we didn't want.
So this got a lot of media attention and painting you in a hugely negative light, and he allowed that to happen.
He was a large part of the reason why
He was party to that, sure. Wow. That's just incredible. Now, speaking about electronic court filings or ECFs, I've downloaded those. I put them on my website. I've noticed a few that were missing. Can you go into that? Why they were,
like
in your opinion, why they're under seal?
Some were sealed, and he made no attempt to get them. One of them was the warrant, and he made no attempt to ask the attorney for the warrant. And
There could have been exculpatory evidence in that.
Yeah,
you just don't know.
He has a duty to get everything and put it in front of me, and also to examine it himself.
That's huge. Okay, so we have the seals that you have not been open to see. We have the fact that he did not protect your interests and redact certain documents. As far as his professionalism, has he had the opportunity to treat you as a professional officer the court have been? Has he ever made any comments that would give you cause for pause?
Well, I mean, he's I think in attempting to ingratiate himself to me and make himself appear to be a relatable, likable figure, he made some comments which were a little too revealing. When we were on our way to the aforementioned lunch where there wasn't much to talk about and he just wanted to charge the government $90 an hour, he pointed out to me a dispensary, and he said, this was in Berkeley, and he said, that's my dispensary that I go to all the time, and he, told multiple stories about, or said he was hungover one particular morning, or, talked about drinking way too much. And it was both an attempt to make him seem like my friend when he wasn't, and also just revealing behavior that, could reasonably be construed to have compromised the quality.
And you wouldn't know any different. This is only the first time you've had an attorney in your life, right?
Yeah.
What about the Grateful Dead? Some comments he made about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, he made some comments about going to a Grateful Dead concerts back in the day,
where they would consistently use acid and smoke weed and do everything else. So I'm not saying he did that, but I mean, what was your take from him telling you that was a normal process, that you did nothing wrong?
Well, I mean, not just that, but that, as people who are familiar with the Grateful Dead know, that's a community. So if you like that music and you like that community, you understand certain things about psychedelics, and you're with the
It's accepting.
movement. Yeah, I mean, it's that you're part of. It's a family. So
that was his representation. Then he's part of that family in a sense.
Yeah, in a sense, he wanted me to believe that he was, and he did a good job, Well,
your dad's an activist, and I mean, you're very familiar with activism and what it takes to, fight the status quo. It's in your DNA. Let's face it. Did your attorney work hard enough for you? Did he bang the table? Did he get you credit for time served? What can you tell us?
Well, it came to my attention afterwards, only as I was reviewing these documents with others, that he had made an agreement without my knowledge or consent with the AUSA that would not give me credit for time served, the 4.5 months I spent in jail. And I had no idea.
So that was stolen time.
Essentially, yeah. So they'd sentenced me, in essence, to 10 years.
When did you
4 months.
first find out that this mutual stipulation had been agreed to around you?
I mean, when I reached out to people and I started going over the documents.
You actually saw them?
Yeah.
Okay. So what would you like right now? What's your first step?
Well, the first thing I'd like is I don't have any money. I used to have some money, now I have no money. And I've worked a variety of jobs, and I still don't have a lot of money. I'm sure a lot of you know how that goes. But I need good representation. And I think it's not what I don't really care too much about what happens to me in particular, but if someone wants to represent me as an opportunity to be a part of paving the way and building a precedent.
Are you talking through an appeal?
Yeah, through an appeal or...
But what makes you think that will be any better? Like the court's already offered you a court-appointed attorney for the appeal. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I mean, if the conduct of the first court-appointed counsel is any indication, I have no confidence that the second one will be any better.
And you're supposed to turn yourself in when?
July 22nd.
And when's the court-appointed appellate attorney available?
They said, first they said 4 to 6 weeks, and last I talked, which was a few days ago, they said a month.
So that doesn't give that attorney much time to work with.
It sounds to me as though they're intentionally trying to burn through as much time as possible.
And you're not prepared to represent yourself pro se, but you are taking further control of your case. What do you need right now to understand your case better?
I need professional legal help.
But what about what you don't know? Don't you want to see those sealed documents?
Well, yeah, and I mean, I'm going to request that I see those, and I'm going to, let my lawyer know everything that I've just said and lay it out and say that I'm going to make a declaration and ask to see these documents, and whether he provides them or not, it's a little too late, but I'd still like to see them.
Well, it's not too late, because these decisions
It's too
can
late
be
for him.
for
It's
that
not too
attorney.
late for
That
me.
is, yes.
It's too
Okay,
late
I
for
misunderstood
him.
you. You're
Yeah.
right. So that attorney really, no telling how many other cases he's dealt with this way, and how that would impact many previous decisions.
And a lot of these people, like he told me that he enjoyed having me as a client because a lot of his other clients were essentially, gangbangers and MS-13 or whatever, and which makes me think that like imagine if this had happened to someone else who didn't have a college education. I mean, it worked on me, and I have a college education. And like, imagine these poor people who grew up in way tougher environments than I've grown up in, who had way less educational opportunities, way more trauma, way more just chaos in their upbringing. They'd have no idea. They'd stand no chance against this guy, who's essentially working as an arm of the prosecutor's office.
And it might be his full-time job.
Could be.
Okay, so we have to take a look at that and what happened in your case and why you were sentenced at a level 37. So if you look at all these things combined and your inexperience, you believed that the smart thing to do at the time was to make that open court guilty plea.
He certainly, his body language and his manner when he's around the AUSA and his ease in going up to her,
Familiarity.
and striking a conversation, his familiarity and first name basis suggests that he's been working with her very closely for a long time. And I saw this multiple times when we were in court or about to go to court.
So I guess the lesson, and even now the final chapters have yet to be written, is to take more interest in your case, to really understand what it is you may not even know, right? and then try to get that knowledge. And it took you getting out of court, which, by the way, you weren't immediately incarcerated. They gave you, what, 3 months to turn yourself in?
Which is unusual because usually if it's sentenced 10 years or more, the policy is for them to immediately remand you into custody.
Do you have any thoughts why they didn't charge you with the cannabis? It's still federally illegal, or the ketamine for that matter. Why do you think it is? Was that addressed in court? Is it a changing view in the evolution of cannabis?
It was not addressed in court, but the only thing that I can assume for the cannabis is that it's an agreement between the Attorney General of the United States representing the Department of Justice to not pursue federal indictments under, I believe it's under 100 kilos in states where it's legal.
And I've looked, I don't see that anywhere in the Department of Justice's guidelines, so that must be an unwritten policy.
Exactly, and it's in violation of the doctrine of preemption, and it's in violation of federal law. So it's inconsistent, but it's consistently inconsistent at least. But then you have then you have the ketamine, which isn't legal in California yet. SB 519 is going to legalize everything.
It may, yes. It's currently being considered to pass.
And the state senators have said there was a news headline earlier, a couple months ago, that said, "We will pass this." So I don't think there's any question that it will pass.
Well, how would that affect your case, though? Because that was prior, you got involved with this prior to that passing.
Well, I mean, there's cases in which, as far as I understand them, in which 215 passing affected cases that were previous to that passing, cannabis cases.
And there are.
So if they're going to be consistently inconsistent, once 519 passes,
they can revisit your case.
They should, and frankly, they have no choice but to revisit my case.
But it may not even come to that. I mean, if we have ineffective assistance of counsel, and that can be vetted, that very well may open the matter up again for you. So is that what you hope for today? That it not even get to appellate? This could be dealt with at a lower federal court level?
I'd like it to just be tossed out because that's what it deserves. I mean, not even on the not even on the ineffective counsel, which is undeniable. Just the merits of the law itself are ridiculous. And one of the purposes that there's a threefold purpose that's set out in the United States Code. That's the whole rationale for the Sentencing Commission and the reason they do things the way they do. It's supposed to be to promote respect for the law, and to provide a sentence that's long enough but not longer than necessary to ensure deterrence. And obviously, from the 66% federal recidivism rate, none of their laws provide sufficient deterrence. That's a different argument. But the idea that anything that they've done so far, whether that's the counsel they've provided me with or the laws themselves as they exist, deserve respect, is just boggles the mind.
As you know, I'm suing judges because there is this black wall where judges tend to protect judges and lawyers protect lawyers and judges protect lawyers and so on. So this black wall in the civil matters is definitely there. I've seen now where it appears to be the same case in criminal. Haven't experienced it myself, but you certainly have. And prior to sentencing, and while she's still under review of everything, including having to listen to your arguments in defense, she's calling you greedy and a parasite. So there's bias there from the bench. That's an extrajudicial statement.
It is, but unfortunately there is a history, and it's worth exploring, and no doubt we will, but there is a history of judges being able to say outrageous shit at sentencing and get away with it.
But it does affect appellant processes, let's say.
Yeah.
You have constitutional rights that should be protected, and they've got a very sacred position, okay, in our society. So we would ask that a young man, 26 years old now, not have to give up 10 years of his life, very important portion of his life, where you would get a lot done, and then have this permanent stain on your record when the court appoints counsel that does what they did in this case. So,
and not only that, when attitudes are clearly changing so fast
good point,
towards what they should have been the whole time.
And why they didn't choose to charge you for cannabis.
And it's what's worth thinking about is the millions and millions and millions of years of jail time and prison time and supervised release and the billions of dollars of fines that have been handed down for cannabis when it does nobody any harm virtually anywhere ever. And to think about all the knock-on consequences of that, the lost economic productivity, the families that have been ripped apart, the children that have been affected.
We have a lot of police and law enforcement getting into licensed cannabis industries in direct violation of federal law. So what is that telling us? The perceptions are changing as we speak.
And not only that, it shows us that it's all a joke. It's all a game. It's not that they don't take seriously what they say, and they themselves acknowledge that they're doing tremendous wrong.
So you had the whole weight of the federal government against you with the Department of Homeland Security and God knows who else, and the federal court, and you just didn't have the tools, the finances necessary to launch a serious defense to this, did you? You were left with this public defender. Did you have any other options? None.
I mean, take out a loan, but we can't afford that.
No. And well, this is a wonderful place. I mean, first of all, it will bankrupt you, and it might not have ended up any differently because there's not a lot of lawyers that understand the fight you're involved with. So let's close this on this. I mean, the final chapters aren't written. I hope you get it tossed. I hope whatever time you do.
But if I don't, so be it.
So
and
be it.
I'll proudly do those years.
Let's get this fully vetted, okay? Where is Matthew Hutchings going in the future? Are you going to be an activist? Are you going to be the next generation activist that alerts people to what's going on here and the monopolies that are being created with these drugs and the dangers these propositions become? What is the Matthew Hutchings of tomorrow?
Well, it looks like I don't really have a choice, and I thankfully there's a lot of other people already out there who've come to the same conclusion, and I'm looking forward to reaching out to them as well and talking more with them and seeing where I can best place myself to do the most good.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Matthew, very much. Keep up the good fight. We're certainly happy to hear that you share your story with us. And, Godspeed and God bless, my friend.
Thanks.